Hey y'all, welcome back to another hunting ammo ballistics gel test. Today we're going to be pitting Hornady Outfitter against Hornady Superformance. Both are the 165 grain CX load in 308 Winchester. And here are those boxes for the Hornady Outfitter and Hornady Superformance ammo. Same bullet. This will be an interesting test. 165 grain CX for each one. First, let's go ahead and take a look at the Outfitter box. Now, personally, I absolutely love how the Hornady Outfitter boxes look. It's like a topo map, nice tan color. That just kind of gets me. We'll flip it around to the back. Here is your promo information. Feel free to stop, pause, and read all that if you would like. Let's flip it around and take a look at velocity. And stated muzzle velocity is 2610 feet per second. It'll be interesting to see how much faster we get with Superformance. And here's the back of the box for that Superformance version. Feel free to stop, pause, and read all this if you would like. But the big claim to fame here for Superformance ammo is that it should be going 1 to 200 feet per second faster than your standard stuff. And they're claiming 2,750 feet per second. Now remember, it's the same bullet in each one of these ammos, so 2,750 versus 2,610, that's a difference of 140 feet per second. It'll be interesting to see how big the difference actually winds up being out of the 16-inch barrel of my Ruger American. Let's go ahead and whip this stuff out and take a look at it. And here are the two cartridges. We have your Outfitter here on the right, your Superformance on the left. The Outfitter has a nickel-plated brass case. Superformance is just standard brass. Something else I want to point out, if I can get my camera to focus on it, the case neck, the case mouth of the Outfitter ammo is like sealed. It's got like sort of a lacquer sealant. This camera's driving me nuts trying to focus. Anyways, so this is sort of impervious to weather, at least it sort of should be. Flipping it around to the primer, it's the same thing, and it's hard to see in the camera. I'm not sure if you can tell, but the Outfitter primer does have some kind of a sealant around it, and it appears the Superformance does not. Regardless, let's go shoot this stuff and see how they do. And my test rifle today is my Ruger American Standard, chambered in 308 Winchester, of course. It has a 22-inch barrel. I did have it threaded so I could use a Silencer Co. Hybrid 46 suppressor. And coming on back, I've got it topped off with a Vortex Diamondback 4-16x42 scope. Definitely helps see the gel blocks down there. And of course, I've got one of my handmade leather cartridge cuffs on the buttstock. Check out my website, masonleather.com. I would love to make you one. And I've also got one of my super thick Latigo leather slings on there. Those are also available on my website. And coming around to the other side, I've got to show you my whitetail deer design. And check out my brand new website, masonoutdoors.com, or my Amazon storefront, where you can get all my favorite range gear and outdoor equipment. Everything you see I personally use and can recommend with confidence. And every purchase helps me bring you more YouTube videos. Links are in the video description and the pinned comment. Now, back to the video. We'll be taking 3 shots from 100 yards, firing into 10% ballistics gel that has been calibrated to meet the FBI's ballistics testing protocol. And while ballistics gel isn't an exact proxy for big game, it does provide a repeatable medium through which to test various bullets and ammo against each other. After the shots, we'll examine bullet expansion, weight retention, penetration, and velocity. My goal is to provide hunters like you and I with the most objective information possible to help us make the best choice for our particular hunting situation. The ballistics gel in this video has been sourced from Clear Ballistics. You can find a link in the description. So let's go ahead and shoot it. And here are the velocities for that Hornady Outfitter 165 grain CX load out of the 308. Minimum 2555, max 2578 for an average of 2567. And then here are the velocities for the same bullet, 165 grain CX, but for the Hornady Superformance load. Minimum 2702, max 2717 for an average of 2711. And we'll get more in depth with velocity here in a second. And we are down here at the blocks after shooting those Hornady Outfitter 165 grain CX bullets in these blocks right here, and also the Hornady Superformance 165 grain CX bullets in these blocks right here. Extremely similar performance on the blocks. The velocities were different. We'll talk about that in a minute. But as far as penetration goes, let's talk about the Outfitter load. So these things went very, very deep. We've got one bullet right here at about, we'll call it 39.5 inches. That is extremely deep for any solid copper bullet that I've tested so far. And then the other bullet is right here at, we'll call it 37 inches, maybe 37.5. I only captured 2 bullets for each load. I fired several more trying to capture them. But the problem is these things penetrate so deep that if it's not going perfectly straight through the blocks, they will veer out. So if there's any angle at all to the shot, which is hard to avoid, those bullets will fly outside of the block. So I did get 2 of each for us to look at. And then coming on back to the first block for the Outfitter load, there are a couple of wound tracks in there from bullets that I did not recover. But what I want to point out is the wound tracks on these are not really explosive. There's a staple from my table. And this is about the norm of what I've seen from other solid copper hunting bullets. They don't tend to create a huge wound cavity up front. They just sort of penetrate, expand, create a nice little wound cavity, and then penetrate really deep. So this is par for the course with solid copper ammo. And then same story with the Superformance wound track. It's a little bit more pronounced, a little bit more expansion up front, not a whole lot more. But as far as penetration goes on the Superformance load, we've got 1 bullet right here at about the 36.5 inch mark, and the other bullet is right there, and we'll give that one 37 inches. And all of them look like they did mushroom and expand pretty nicely. Of course, they look like they held together really well. Let's dig them out and take a look. All right, y'all, we're back in the lab. We've dug the bullets out of the blocks. Let's go ahead and take a look at them and talk about the metrics. Up top, we've got the 165 grain CXs from the Hornady Outfitter load. And underneath, we've got the CXs from the Superformance load. Same bullets, 2 different loads from Hornady. Outfitter on top, Superformance on bottom. Let's go ahead and hit weight retention. For the Outfitter, we saw 165 grains and 165 grains for an average of, you guessed it, 165 grains, 100% weight retention, sort of par for the course with solid copper bullets. I've seen some worse performance out of solid copper. That video is coming up, but these did great, 100% weight retention. For the Superformance version, almost the same exact thing, 164 grains and 165 grains for an average of, we'll just round it up to 165 grains, so 100% weight retention. The 1 grain from the 1 bullet that, knocked it down to 164, who cares? Excellent weight retention. And then on to expansion. For the Outfitter load, 0.53 and 0.55 inches for an average of 0.54 inches expanded diameter. That works out to 1.7x expansion. Very, very par for the course for solid copper bullets in .308 caliber. And really any caliber except larger ones. I've noticed with solid copper bullets, your bigger stuff, 44 cal, 45 cal, those expand a lot. Your more standard stuff, 30 cal, 243, 270, stuff like that, you tend to see in the 1.7 to 1.9x range, and that's what we got here. These bullets are meant for penetrating deep more than expanding massively. Then for the Superformance one, we saw 0.55 and 0.59 inches respectively for an average of 0.57 inches expanded diameter, which works out to 1.9x expansion, right there in that range I just mentioned, the 1.7 to 1.9. Both of these are par for the course for solid copper bullet expansion from what I've seen across calibers and loads I've tested. Now on to velocity. For the Outfitter load, we saw 25.78 for the high, 25.55 for the low, and 25.68 for the average versus the factory build velocity of 26.10. So we came in 42 feet per second slow versus factory build out of the 22-inch barrel of my rifle. I've seen a lot worse than that. I'm very happy with that. And then for the Superformance, and I expect much higher velocity out of this. That's what it's marketed for is, higher velocity, Superformance. The high velocity was 27.17, the low 27.03 for an average of 27.12 versus the factory build velocity of 27.50. So only 38 feet per second slow. That's pretty darn close to box spec. I'm very happy with that. And we did see extra velocity out of the Superformance as compared to the Outfitter. And on average, we got 144 feet per second extra velocity out of the Superformance. And then real quick, we're going to talk about impact velocity. So how fast were these bullets going when they hit the target down there at 100 yards? Now this metric is based off of a mathematical formula, but I do use factory provided inputs, so it should be very close, but it is an estimate. For the Outfitter load, our impact velocity at 100 yards should be about 2,388 feet per second. And for the Superformance version, we're looking at 2,522 feet per second impact velocity. Just something else to know. And on to penetration. And this is where CX bullets and, your Barnes TSXs and stuff like that, solid copper, this is where they shine, is in penetration. For the Outfitter version, we saw 37.5 inches and 39.5 inches for an average of 38.5 inches of penetration. This stuff punches freaking deep. And for the Superformance, very similar, 36.5 inches and 37 inches for an average of 36.75 inches, right there in the same ballpark. And it would make sense that the Superformance version penetrated a little bit less, which it did because we saw just a hair more expansion, creating a little bit more resistance on the bullet as it's traveling through the block or through the target. All in all, both penetrated extremely well. If you need to punch through something with a .308 Winchester, either one of these will do it for you. And real quick, kinetic energy wise, for the Outfitter load with a 165 grain bullet going on average 2,568 feet per second, we're looking at 2,416 feet per second. And for the Superformance load, again, a 165 grain bullet going on average 2,712 feet per second, we're looking at 2,694 foot-pounds of energy. So you definitely get some more kinetic energy with that Superformance load and that higher velocity. And a quick announcement before we get to my final thoughts: if you'd like early access to my videos weeks and even months in advance of everyone else, become a channel member. The links will be in the video description and the pinned comment. Thanks, y'all. All right, y'all, time for my final thoughts. Both of these loads performed, I think, pretty darn good and on par with what I would expect for a solid copper bullet. What I expected to happen did. The Superformance load provided a bit more velocity, a little bit more expansion. The metrics across the board other than that were almost exactly identical. 100% weight retention, expansion in the 1.7 to 1.9x range, which is par for the course for solid copper bullets in this diameter. Penetration was extremely deep for both. I think these things did exceptionally well for what they're designed to do. They did what they're designed to do, which is penetrate nice and deep and hold together. So what would I use them for, and which one would I choose over the other? It's hard to say. They perform so similarly. I guess at the end of the day, whichever one shot particularly well in my rifle, if it did better than the other, I would just choose it. The exception might be if I'm using this stuff for longer range hunting in particular, I might lean more towards the Superformance because it is going to give you a little bit flatter trajectory with that higher velocity. And that's really the only difference between these two loads. So let me know what you think in the comments. Would you use this stuff? Which one would you pick and why? Or would you go with something totally different? Let me and everybody else know. And check out my website, masonleather.com, and get yourself some leather gear handmade by me just for you. I've been handcrafting leather gear for hunters for over a decade, and I would love to make you something. And there are hundreds of reviews on my website, so you can see what real hunters have to say about their Mason leather gear. And also tons of photos showing all the customizable options, including name, initial, and caliber stamping, as well as wild game designs and more. Everything is handmade by me right here in the USA. I would love to be a part of your hunt through my leather gear. And it helps support this channel, so I can bring you more hunting ammo ballistics gel tests, and lots of other cool stuff in the future. The link will be in the video description and the pinned comment, or you can just type masonleather.com into your web browser and click one of these cards for more hunting ammo ballistics gel tests.